my 7th grade journal?
Yeah, that was 7 years ago.
No, that was more than 7 years ago. But
yeah, it
in
was.
my 7th grade notebook.
Do you write about me in your journal now?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a pic. I don't add pictures of you anymore, but back then I used to tape them in there. I would get I have one from your school pictures, and I have it. And I was like, this is my best friend Celeste.
You don't have one right now of me.
I don't have it. No. Well, because you don't give them to me.
We have so many Polaroids around the house you can use.
Well, give me a Polaroid with just your face on it, and I'll stick it onto my journal. And I'll tell my journal about how much I love you.
Okay.
Okay?
Hi guys, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Today, my name is Celeste. And that's Kathy. And she's going to be telling us a story. And I have no idea what it is. And I'm excited to hear it.
Hello. Today, my name is Kathy. And I'm going to tell you and you about the Fox sisters who unintentionally created spiritualism.
What? Mm-hmm. Okay. Like witches?
Oh, we'll get into it.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, spiritualism is a system of belief or a religion based around the assumption that we can talk to people that have died through mediums.
Okay.
Yeah. It all started with Margareta and Catherine Fox, and at the time they were known as Maggie and Kate. And Maggie was born in 1834, and Kate was born 2 years after, and they were 14 and 11 when the story began. And this is a picture of them.
Oh my gosh, they look so cool.
I know, aren't they precious?
They look so cool.
So in 1848 in Hyattsville, New York, it's now known as Arcadia, New York. It's like in the upstate area, like 40 minutes or 40 miles away from Rochester. Their parents, John and Margaret Fox, they were renting a small cottage by the river because they were waiting for their house to be built. So they were going to live there for the time being. And before this, they had moved around quite a bit, but now they were like getting ready to settle down, and they had a total of 6 children, but at this time, only Maggie and Kate lived with them. Oh. And this is a picture of their house.
Oh, I absolutely love the vibe. Mm-hmm. I would live there 10 out of 10.
I know you would. Mm-hmm. The town of Hyattsville was picturesque. It was beautiful. It had green rolling mountains and hills, a lot of farmland. It looked like straight out of a painting. It was gorgeous. Ooh. The neighbors described the Foxes as sober, respectable Methodists. They were polite and they didn't draw too much attention to themselves. John, the dad, though, he didn't always have this type of reputation. He had a history of alcoholism, and that caused him and his wife Margaret to separate for a few years. Oh. For a while, Margaret was a single mom to her first 4 children, Leah, Maria, Elizabeth, and David.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then John came back. He took his sobriety seriously, and he was a blacksmith, and he took his job seriously as well. He was like, you know what? I love my family. I'm going to get it together. Yeah, shortly after he came back, they had Maggie in 1833. And then a couple of years after that, they had Kate. And also, one of Margaret's children died shortly after this in infancy. Like a little bit after this, yeah.
Oh, that's sad.
So yeah, they were renting this little cottage right by the river, waiting for their house to be built, and they lived near their son, David, that was an adult at this time. And the cottage had everything they needed. It was little, but it had everything they needed. You know, it had 2 bedrooms, cute, but it had a reputation for being haunted.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we don't know if the family was told that it was haunted or supposedly haunted when they moved in, but it did have a reputation around town, and so there's a good chance that maybe at least the kids knew that it was haunted. And I'm gonna give a little bit of backstory about some people that lived there before the Foxes lived there. Okay. It was maybe 5 or 6 years before that. There was a couple called Mr. and Mrs. Bell, and they had a maid named Lucrezia. And sometime in the 1830s, there was a traveling salesman that was selling knives and little trinkets and stuff, and he came to their house, the Bell's house. And I don't know why, but he ended up staying with them for a little bit. He came and was like, hey, you want to buy some trinkets? And then they were like, oh yeah, you want to stay with us for a little bit? I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, things were different back then, for sure.
Yeah. And it was rumored that him and Mrs. Bell had a little fling going on.
Oh my... Mrs. Bell.
I know.
You can't just hook up with a traveling salesman. You're
I know.
married.
You know, times were different back then.
Times were different. Times were different.
Mhm. Shortly after the salesman came to stay with them, they let Lucrezia go, the maid.
Oh, like they fired her?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And apparently she wasn't too upset. She was like, you know what, I understand. It was amicable.
Oh,
it wasn't
okay.
intense or anything. And before leaving, she bought a knife from the salesman and she was like, I'm going to be staying with my dad. Here's my address. You can drop it off here. He never dropped it off.
What? Oh.
He never dropped it off.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. About a week later, after they had told her that they were going to fire her, the Bells asked Lucrezia to come back. She was like, but she needed money, so she was like, okay, I'm going to come back. Whatever.
At first she was like,
That's my guess. I don't know how fast she agreed to it, but she needed the money, so she was like, okay, let me go back. And when she went back to the house, the traveling salesman, all of his little trinkets and knives were at the house. Yeah, but he wasn't there. And she was like, that's a little weird, but maybe the Bells bought all his stuff so that he could just move on and have some money. I don't know. She didn't really think much of it and she didn't ask the Bells about it. She kind of just went on with her life, doing the laundry, cleaning the house, you know.
uh-oh.
But after she came back, when the Bells were gone, she would hear knocking and footsteps from the east bedroom where the salesman had been staying in. And it got to the point that it really freaked her out. And so it got to the point where she refused to be alone in the house when the Bells were out of town unless she had like a buddy or her brother over.
Okay, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
probably would not want to be there either.
Yeah. Eventually the Bells moved out. So just a little backstory. So yeah, the Foxes, Margaret and John and the two girls, they were getting ready to spend the winter there because they had to wait for the whole winter before their house could continue being built in the spring. For some reason, they couldn't work on it in the winter time. I don't know why.
Probably because it was difficult.
Yeah. So in March of 1848, about 3 months after they moved in, the family was peacefully sleeping one night when John and Margaret were startled awake by Maggie yelling for her mother.
Oh no.
And the parents rushed to their room to see what was going on, and the girls were like bolted upright in the bed. And they were like, what's going on? The girls looked pale, like they had just seen a ghost. They looked so freaked out. And Maggie said that they had heard something. And so for a while, the parents were there just kind of like standing there, and it was silent. They didn't hear anything. But then they heard it, and it was like tap, tap, tap. And they were like, oh my God. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall. So that was super creepy. And then they heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. And John and Margaret were like, what the hell is going on? And so they were like, girls, just grab your pillows. You're going to come sleep with us. They grabbed their pillows and they went to sleep with the mom and dad, and nothing happened for the rest of the night. It was fine.
What the hell?
Yeah. The next night, the family went to bed and they fell asleep and the noises came back.
Oh.
Except this time the tapping was louder and they kept the family up for a few hours.
That is so stressful.
I know. Each night after that, the knocking and the tapping and the rapping would get louder to the point where the beds and the chairs trembled slightly.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And when he went to check it, there was nothing there.
What?
Yeah. And in typical male fashion, John was like, you know what? It's probably just some kids playing some tricks on us. We're not even going to live here for that long. You guys are tripping. It's fine. And so he didn't think that anything was happening. But
John.
I know. But Margaret was very easily scared, just like me. She was very superstitious and she was like, what's going on? And the next day, Margaret went over to her son David's house and she was talking to him about this. And he was like, oh, mother, when you find out the cause, it will be one of the simplest things in the world. So he also didn't think that this was a big deal.
He said that to her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Verbatim. Yep. And he also told her not to tell the neighbors because he was like, they're gonna think you're weird.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically everybody's gaslighting poor Mrs. Margaret Fox. Okay. And then another night the girls screamed for their mom, and when she came over they told her that it felt like something heavy sat on their feet, and Kate said that she felt as if some cold hands cupped her face. What? And they were freaked out. And often the girls said that something was pulling off their sheets while they were sleeping, and that something was like rearranging the furniture. And every night without fail they'd hear like tap tap tap, like somebody was inside the walls trying to get out.
That is so creepy. Stressful.
I know. Oof. And by now the family was exhausted, dude. And then came the night that changed everything. March 31st, 1848. So Margaret was so tired at this point. She literally was getting sick because she was so tired, you know?
Yeah.
And so she was like, we're all gonna go to bed right before sundown. Everybody grab your stuff. It's in the same bed. It's gonna be fine. So they were all cozied up, ready to sleep, and everything was quiet. Like they didn't think that they would hear knockings that night. But then they came again and it was like knock, knock, knock. And so Kate was like,
Ugh.
you know what? I'm going to talk to the spirit. And she so she was like, Mr. Splitfoot, do as I do. And she clapped twice. And Splitfoot is a nickname for the devil.
Oh my god.
And that's so creepy.
Wow.
So she was like, do as I do. And she clapped twice. There was like a short pause. And then 2 knocks answered her back. And Maggie was like, now do as I do. And she clapped 4 times and 4 raps answered.
What?
And then Kate held up 2 fingers and the spirit knocked twice. And so Kate was like, Mother, look, it can see as well as hear.
Ooh.
Now, Margaret-
No.
Yeah, no. Margaret was super superstitious. So at this point, she was scared to death. And I could only imagine the type of stuff that's like running through her head. She was probably like, are my children psychic? Or are we being haunted? Is this some kind of like magical cottage? You know, like probably she was so scared.
Oh.
And then Maggie to their mom was like, now you ask it a question. Margaret said, how many children do I have? And they heard 6 knocks. And she had 6 children, including the one that passed away.
No.
Margaret was like, oh my god. And she asked it, is this a human being that answers my question so correctly? Or silence. And then she asked it, is it a spirit? If it is, make 2 raps. And then she heard 2 loud raps that shook the bed.
Oh, okay.
I know. Margaret asked, were you injured in this house? And they heard 2 raps again.
What?
Yeah, so she kept asking the spirits questions, and eventually she found out that the spirit was of a man that was murdered in the cottage when he was only 31 years old, and that his body was buried in the cellar under 10 feet of dirt.
Wow. Okay, that's so creepy. I think I know who it is. Oh no.
Margaret was like, what the hell? I have to tell somebody about this crazy ghost. And so she was like, John, you have to go grab my friend. And so she sends John to town that night to grab her friend, Mrs. Redfield. And he's like, you have to come with me. And she's like, okay. And so they go over. And Margaret tells Mrs. Redfield everything. And she's like, at first she was like, I think your daughters are playing a prank on you, girl. But then she goes to their room and she sees how scared they are. Like, they just seem so frightened and like out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And so she's like, okay, I believe you. And then she herself heard the knocks. And so Mrs. Redfield went to get her husband. And they came back and they were asking the spirit all these questions. And it was answering them in knocks. And then Mr. Redfield went to the Doozlers, who then went to the Hydes. And then they went to the Jules' house. And then they brought them all back. So pretty much there was like 15 people in the house at this point. And they were all convinced they were talking to a ghost.
Okay. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. John asked the spirit if who had hurt him was in the room currently, and it was silent. The neighbors had a ton of follow-up questions after that. And so they were communicating back and forth, and they determined that the spirit was of a traveling salesman who had been murdered in the east bedroom where the girls now slept.
Okay.
And it happened about 5 years earlier on a Tuesday night at midnight with a butcher knife.
No.
And the neighbors asked why he was murdered, and he said it was because of money. It was about $500 to be precise, which was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Probably like 16 million. So that night, Margaret took the girls and went to spend the night at a neighbor's house while John and Mr. Redfield stayed up wanting to communicate with the spirit. But they didn't make any more contact.
Okay.
And then the day after that, all kinds of people were in and out of the house, like farmers, shopkeepers, and they all wanted to know if the ghost was, or the spirit was accepting questions. And so they would ask the ghost about their dead relatives, what the afterlife looks like, if their crops would be successful. Because this was like a pretty big farming town, and so
yeah.
They would ask what their children's futures looked like and stuff like that. And the spirit would tell them like, oh, there's nothing for you to worry about in the afterlife, and your kids are going to be super successful. And before they knew it, there was like 300 people trying to come to this little cottage to talk about ghosts. Yeah. And Kate told her mom that first night, she was like, tomorrow is April Fool's Day. So if someone's messing with us, they'll probably tell us tomorrow. It's probably a prank, right?
Yeah.
But then April 1st came, and nobody came and told them that they were playing a joke on them.
Okay.
And people just kept coming over to talk about this ghost.
It went from being a spooky, scary ghost to being like the neighborhood fortune teller.
I know. I know.
Oh, no, that'd be funny if they made a funny movie about that.
Oh my gosh, there's actually like a funny musical about this.
What?
Yeah, I watched like a tiny little snippet of it.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's wild.
In the course of those first wrapping events, the spirit named his killer as John Bell, a former inhabitant of the house, and he identified himself as one Charles B. Rosna. Now, nobody could find an account of any Rosna, like Charles or any other Rosna, but they did confirm that a Mr. Bell lived there, who had since moved to Moravia, and they accused him of having committed a murder in the house. And so Bell rushed back to clear his name, and they couldn't try him because there was no body, there was no evidence, and the literal only witness was a ghost. So they let him go. Yeah. As much as people loved coming over to talk to the spirit, there were equally as many people that were put off by the supposed paranormal activities happening in the house. And so a lot of people would stand outside reading Bible verses and just like protesting. It's funny that that has been going around for so long.
There's always gonna be somebody who's just pissed for no reason.
Just reading Bible verses outside of something. That's funny. And people were upset enough to the point where, so they belonged to this Methodist Episcopal church, and the minister asked them to leave. He was like, the girls are engaging in unholy behaviors and the parents should pay for it, so I'm gonna need you guys to leave. So they were kicked out of church.
Wow. It's not their fault that the ghost is talkative.
I know. It's like, I'm sorry that I can talk to ghosts, okay? Margaret, the mom, she begged the spirit to stay away from her family, but he absolutely did not.
Okay.
And they were past the times of burning witches at the stake, but it was still really taboo to talk about anything like this, like paranormal or, weird. And some people even suggested that they do an exorcism on the girls. So that's super weird.
That's so weird. Why them?
Because they were the ones that they were like the
communicators, like primary communicators.
Yeah.
That still feels so unfair though, because it's
know.
like, that's not their fault.
I know.
Wow.
And it's a lot. The girls were only like 11 and 14 at the time, so that's kind of a lot to just, throw on little girls.
Oh.
So yeah, this is where Leah comes in, their older sister. This is Leah.
Oh my gosh, love her. I love how they all have like short hair.
I know.
It's cute.
And Leah at the time was 33 and she lived in Rochester. She was a single mama and she worked as a piano teacher. She had gotten married super young at 14.
Whoa.
This is a quote from her autobiography. Mr. Fish had discovered one too late that he had married a child and soon became indifferent to his home and family. So after he married her and had a kid with her, he realized that she was a child and was like, I gotta go.
Ew, dude. Come on.
Yeah, so she was a single mom and she heard about what was happening down in Hydesville, like people getting kind of intense with her family and, her little sister's communicating with a ghost.
Yeah.
And so she decided to go see them. And at the time they were staying with David, they were trying to get a little privacy from everything that was happening, like the increasingly hostile attention they were getting.
Yeah.
Now Leah, she saw this as a wonderful opportunity. She had just read the book The Divine Principles of Nature, which was a best-selling book by Andrew Jackson Davis, who talked about Emanuel Swedenborg and his beliefs. And this book talked about how our world is a reflection or like a shadow of the spirit world, and that even though most humans weren't aware of it, that the spirits were in constant communication with us. And he predicted that something would happen soon to kind of bridge the gap between that communication.
Wow.
Yeah, so Leah was like, this is my chance. My sisters are going to talk to some ghosts and I'm going to make a lot of money.
Oh my, Leah.
I know.
I thought you were going to say she's going to move down there and help her sisters.
No, not at all.
No, she's going to go exploit them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Rochester had a lot going on. People were a lot more open-minded when it came to paranormal stuff and new religions and stuff like that. Rochester is actually where Mormonism began, as well as Millerism, which is now known as the Seventh-day Adventism. And Rochester is also rumored to be very, very haunted. And I feel like that's a story for another day that we should cover.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So she was like, it's the perfect place. And Leah was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break from being a little piano teacher. She decided to really throw herself into the role of their manager, or as she referred to, the spirit knocking interpreter.
What? Leah.
I know. So she decides to move her sisters with her to Rochester. And Margaret Fox, the mom, also joined her daughters and moved with them.
Okay.
And it's hard to know what Leah thought exactly in this moment, because at this point they had only ever communicated with one ghost. So it's hard to know if she was like, well, if they could talk to one ghost, they could probably talk to all of them. Like, I don't know.
Huh.
It's really weird.
She's like, I don't know what they're doing. If they can fake it, that's good too.
Yeah, literally. And so,
oh wow.
yeah. The first people that Leah invited over to witness her little sisters communicating with spirits was a Quaker couple named Isaac and Amy Post. And the Posts were super skeptical about spiritualism. And they were really cool. They helped with the Underground Railroad, and they were also part of the abolitionist movement, which was like the anti-slavery movement.
Wow.
So very cool people, yeah.
Interesting to think about people back, like Quakers specifically, being like that.
I know. Cool, right?
Yeah.
When Leah first told the Post, I was gonna say when Leah first told the Quakers, when Leah first told the Post about her little sisters being mediums, they laughed and asked her if her family had suffered from psychological delusion.
Okay.
But Leah was determined to win them over because they were well connected and they were respected within the community. So if she could get in with them, she could get in with everybody, essentially.
Yeah.
They also had lost children very young to illnesses, so Leah was treating this as a business and wanted to use this to her advantage. So she has the Post come over, and they sit down with Maggie and Kate, and as well as Leah and their mom Margaret, and they had a seance. And by the end of it, the Posts were convinced that the girls were mediums because they were convinced that they had communicated with their dead young children. Yeah. So once the Posts were believers, that's when word really got around Rochester about these girls. Everyone was hearing about these two young girls that could actually talk to spirits. Like, the crowd was enticed. People were like, who are they? I want to get to know them. Let me talk to my dead family.
Wow.
And soon after that, Leah moved the family to a bigger house where they could host bigger groups of people, and they would charge $1 a person, which was like a pretty good amount back then.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
I know. The group would arrive and they would sit around a table and they'd kick it off with a prayer and they'd sing a little, and then after that they'd all hold hands and sit in silence and wait for the spirit to start communicating with them. And either Maggie or Katie would fall into a trance, and that's when the group would hear faint knockings coming from the spirits. Sometimes both of the little sisters would be present, sometimes only one of them, but Leah was always there without a fail. And she would be the one taking requests from people that were asking to make contact with their loved ones that had passed.
Wow.
Now, some people absolutely obsessed with the Fox sisters. They were like, I believe it. Some people not so much. The girls got accused of witchcraft, blasphemy, demonic activities, you name it, you know, just like they did back in Hightsville. You know, it's interesting to think about what their perspective was like from that negative backlash, considering they were so young.
Yeah,
you know?
just little girls.
Yeah. But Leah, our little business manager, was determined to make money. So she was like, you know what, this sucks. We're all gonna suck it up. It's fine. Yeah. So they ended up holding a lot of seances, like in the hundreds. A lot of seances.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And then on November 14th, 1848, Leah rented the largest venue in Rochester, the Corinthian Hall. And Leah said that the spirits demanded that spiritualism be presented to a wider audience. And this public seance was advertised in the local paper, and it was reprinted in multiple books, including one that was called Modern Spiritualism, Its Facts and Fanaticisms, Its Consistencies and Contradictions by Eliab W. Capron in 1855. And in it, it said, let the citizens of Rochester embrace this opportunity of investigating the whole matter and see if those engaged in laying it before the public are deceived or are deceiving others, and if neither accounts for these truly wonderful manifestations. Come and investigate. And the admission was 25 cents per person.
So they're basically like, come and see for yourself.
Are they lying?
You'll see. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And so the Fox sisters, they had done seances many times by now, but never before in front of like 100 people, you know, like hundreds of people at once. So this was something new to them. And Kate was sick that day, and so Leah had taken her place. And so it was Leah and Maggie up there. And Maggie wore a pale blue dress, looking like a tiny little baby, precious baby princess. So there were hundreds of people that showed up and kicked it off with a speech by a respected person, a local figure, telling the story that by now was well known about the girls and the murder that they solved of the traveling salesman.
Oh, yeah.
He compared the girls' discovery to those of Galileo, Newton, and Fulton. He was like, people laughed at them too, and they went on to become geniuses.
That's a good point.
Yeah. The girls would be tested in front of the crowd, and they would know for once and for all if they were lying or if they were telling the truth. Eliab Capron, the one that wrote that book with the announcement in it, he was an early historian of the movement. He was also there to document the whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
And show support. So these seances went on for 4 nights. On the first night, they were seated at a wooden table, and the lights were dimmed, and 5 influential members of the Rochester Society sat in chairs on stage as kind of like a silent endorsement. They just sat on stage. It's kind of creepy to think about. It's like the seance and then 5 people just sitting there like
watching.
Yeah.
Oh.
Everyone was so silent in there. If you dropped a pin, you would have heard it on the ground. If silent.
Ooh.
And then someone asked if the spirit was with them. And after a dramatic moment, a clear, loud rapping broke the silence.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, yes. And the demonstration went on with a series of questions and responses. And when Leah and Mackie left the stage, the applause from the believers was incredibly loud. People were like, yep, they're for real. But there were a lot of people that did not believe them.
Oh my goodness.
A lot of the crowd was skeptical. Some of them didn't believe it for 1 second, but it's like, but you bought the ticket.
Yeah, it's like, you bought the ticket.
You bought the ticket, but you're gonna complain. Like, okay. A lot of them were hissing and booing, and they were not nice, and...
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, she's a little girl.
Yeah, literally, she's a little girl. Leave her alone.
Aww.
There was a group of people that had a lot to say about this whole thing, and they demanded that a group of Rochester's most prominent citizens examine the girls and do a series of tests on the girls to prove whether or not they could actually talk to spirits.
That's insane.
I know.
How would they know?
I know. It's like, who are these respected? What are they, like, ghost professors? Like, why would these people be the ones?
Why would they be any different?
Yeah. And so the next morning, the girls agreed. They were like, we're not lying about anything. We'll do your little tests and maybe people then will shut the hell up. And so, yeah.
Oh, goodness.
So after the committee's investigation, the leader of this little group had to publicly tell that audience that there was no rational explanation to these knockings and that they didn't find anything that disproved the girls' abilities to connect with spirits. And even after that, there were some skeptics. Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is what you wanted.
This is what you wanted. This is what you got. You're still not happy with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then for the next 3 days, the girls, Maggie and Leah, complied with investigations done by different committees chosen from the previous night's audience, and the sisters were literally manhandled. Yeah, this is a quote from American Heritage. The investigators held their feet, placed the young women in different positions, made them stand on glass plates with their skirts tied tightly around their ankles, even listened to their lungs with a stethoscope.
What?
The female contingent of the audience played its own vital role. As Capron wrote, a committee of ladies took the young women into a room, disrobed them, and examined their persons and clothing. Maggie and Leah apparently cried with shame, but they emerged undisgraced, and throughout the proceedings, according to committee members, raps resounded on the floors, doors, and walls.
That's so sad. That's so messed up.
I know, that's so invasive. And on the 4th and last night, even after all those weird invasive tests were done on the girls, there was a mob of angry people that showed up, and they were angry, and they were yelling, and they were like, I think you're lying to me, and I'm really mad about it. And like, okay, I know. And the girls had to be escorted out by the police because it was just so intense, and the press was losing it. They were not convinced either that this was real. One reporter from the New York Tribune wrote, "It is difficult to understand why spirits who act with as little reason as children or idiots would spend time thumping the wall." Which is kind of like, that's obviously rude, but that's kind of a good point. If spirits are so powerful and can connect with us, why is the only way that they can connect with us through knocks?
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of weird. But it seemed like the whole shabacle was worth it because after those various committees did those tests, they unanimously acquitted Maggie and Leah of any fraud. They were like, you know what? I'm sorry for all the weird tests. Sorry for all the angry people. We think you're legit. Sorry.
Wow, really? Okay, well, that's good at least.
Yeah.
I mean, besides all the trauma.
Yeah.
That they had to go to
through. So the Fox sisters basically became the spokespeople for the new spiritualist movement.
Wow.
And the people that believed them were stoked. And the sisters stayed in Rochester for 4 years, holding seances in their house and sometimes in other people's houses. And they did get a good amount of enthusiastic press. Newspapers called them the spiritual knockers from Rochester. And they started getting invites to visit Troy and Albany.
Wow.
But it wasn't all fun and games for these girls all the time. Men would yell vulgar things at these girls when they arrived and left the theaters. Weird, misogynist men would say sexist things to them, calling them like sex workers and stuff. And like at this point, Maggie was 19 and Kate was 15, so they're still teenagers, you know? And there's nothing wrong with sex work, but why are you, saying that to young girls? That's so weird and creepy.
Yeah, that is so creepy, dude.
I know. It's disgusting to think about how long misogyny has been around for.
Yeah.
You know? Just along with racism, obviously. You know.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. Yeah.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, Maggie was getting sick of this at this point. Maggie was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But Leah wouldn't let her quit. And so in
Leah.
1850, Leah actually decided that they needed an even bigger platform. And so she was like, you know what? We're going to move to New York City. And she just continued to work the girls to the bone.
Yeah.
I know.
She needs to be stopped. I feel like she's the villain here.
Yeah, big time.
Exploiting her little sisters.
I know.
Yeah.
During the Civil War, there were a lot of deaths. There were also a lot of epidemics at the time, like cholera, whooping cough, influenza, and diphtheria.
Mhm.
And also, nearly 1/3 of all city-born infants would die before turning 1 year old.
Oh.
And young mothers were also having an average of like 5 children, and they often passed away due to puerperal fever. I think that's how you say it. That's caused by like unsanitary hygiene during birth. And so death was all around at this time. And so a lot of people wanted to talk to their past loved ones. And so it made sense that the Fox sisters became so popular at this time because there were so many people that were dealing with heavy deaths, you know?
Yeah.
One of those people was President Franklin Pierce's wife, Jane Appleton. She had lost 2 children and she was mourning them. And she actually witnessed one of them, his passing. He was 11 years old. His name was Benny. And it was really hard on her. And so she invited Maggie over to the White House to see if she could communicate with Benny. There's not really any, I couldn't find any conversation, any transcript of what that was like, but I'm assuming that Maggie contact with Benny, according to Jane. It was pretty 50-50 at this point, like people that believed in spirit, the whole talking to spirits, and people that didn't believe it, you know?
Yeah.
The people that didn't believe it aggressively didn't believe it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just like now.
Yeah. And in April of 1854, they called it rapomania. That's what the critics called it. It had swept the nation.
They called believing in spirits rapomania?
Just like the whole like
the
ghost knocking.
Oh.
Yeah, they called it like rapomania.
Oh, okay.
In the spring of that year, 2 members of the U.S. Senate from Illinois and Massachusetts brought up a petition from 15,000 Americans demanding a commission to study spiritualism. And they were trying to figure out whose job it would be in the government to figure this out. And someone said that it should be the post office because of the prospect of like a spiritual telegraph between this world and the other. Nothing came out of this though.
That's
kind of
cute
idea.
idea.
Yeah. So the girls moved to New York City and they were staying at Barnum's Hotel, owned by a cousin of P.T. Barnum, who was known as the Great Showman. And the sisters would hold seances in Barnum's hotel parlor, and they also spent 2 weeks as house guests of Horace Greeley, the New York Tribune's editor. And he invited all of his friends over and he introduced them, and he was telling everybody, he was like, finally there's proof of an afterlife. And side note, in 1872, Greeley was on his deathbed when he said, "Tell the Fox family I bless them. I have been made very happy through them. They have prepared me for this next hour."
It's like if they haven't done anything, at least they're giving some people peace of mind when it comes to like death.
Yeah. Even with all of their popularity, the girls still had some doubters big time.
Okay.
A panel with some fancy respected men from New York. It's like, who even are these men? But they visited the girls and tried to catch them in their lies. And they would grill them. They were like asking them question after question.
Ew.
And trying to make them slip. But they didn't.
Ugh.
And the girls passed every question with flying colors. They charmed their skeptics, and it made it easier for them to be even more popular after this.
Stupid.
In New York, Leah was working the girls to the bone, making them resent her even more and more. She had the girls holding seances for groups of 30 3 times a day.
Holy.
So, yeah, once at 10 p.m., once at 5 p.m., and finally at 8 p.m., charging each person $1. Yeah, they were pulling in $90 a day, which was about $1,600 now a day.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The money was coming in, but the competition was also growing. People all around the country, especially in New York, were claiming to be mediums. And with the entertainment industry growing, they also had a lot of tricks up their sleeves as well. So they were adding effects like floating furniture, messages magically written in foreign languages, special lighting, unseen orchestras playing, materialization, which is the mysterious creation of matter. They had like tricks up their sleeves AF. And by now, it was estimated that there were more than 100 mediums now in New York City alone.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Dang, and it's like which ones are real and which ones are fake.
And Kate did the most work to expand her craft. She learned how to do automatic writing and spiritualist drawings. And there were fakes everywhere. But believers insisted that the Fox girls were truthful because they were too young, too uneducated, and too innocent to have tricked so many upper class people.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of an insult, but whatever.
I know. You're too poor to make rich people believe your lies.
Jeez.
Okay. The girls occasionally started attending other mediums' seances, and they were shocked by what they saw. A lot of them were really sexually charged, and one medium summoned a young female ghost, which was a girl that was essentially wrapped around in gauze-like wrappings. So she was naked up there, and she was a ghost. She, you know, just like weird stuff. And other times things happened in the dark that just made the girls feel uncomfortable. And Maggie was grossed out by all of these sexually charged events.
What?
And being in these adult environments without any supervision had the Fox sisters killing time between their own seances by drinking wine, a lot of wine, and talking about how they wished a handsome man would come and save them from Leah, who they by now hated. You know?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
Kate ended up moving to England, where she married a spiritualist and she had 2 children.
Whoa.
Yeah. Maggie, she found love too. She found love with a handsome older man. Well, he was a 32-year-old Arctic explorer and a Navy surgeon. His name was Elijah Kent Kane, who was searching in the tundra for Sir John Franklin, who went missing with 2 ships and 128 crew members in a famous 1845 expedition.
Whoa. How old was she at this point?
She was like 19.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's a little weird, but at
Yeah.
least she's not like 12,
Yeah.
14, or 15 anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's my thoughts too. His father was a U.S. district judge, and his brother was a Civil War general and lawyer. So Kane was considered a very eligible bachelor.
Oh.
He was famous enough that his love life was talked about in the tabloids. So
Oh
he
my
was
God.
like, yeah, the Bachelorette back in the day.
Oh,
Essentially.
wow.
And Captain Kane first saw Maggie when she was sitting and reading by the window in this like elite upscale Philadelphia hotel. She had been like holding seances all day, and she was just like taking a minute to read and, you know, restore. And he was immediately intrigued by her. He was like, she is so beautiful.
Look at her reading.
Look at her. She knows how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And he was skeptical about spiritualism, but he was captivated by her. So she like drew him in with her cool energy. Mysterious energy. And he started visiting her every day, and he bought her like little gifts, and he started sitting in on her seances, and he would take her out for like rides and walks, and their dates were very friendly, very traditional, very respectable, and eventually they began to fall for each other.
Wow.
Maggie. And Maggie for once was happy, like after all of, like she hated her job.
Oh.
And finally she was happy, you know?
Yeah.
Leah hated Kane.
Okay.
She was like, he's a menace. He is trying to break up this family. He is trying to get rid of my livelihood. Yeah, Leah's a horrible person. But Maggie fell hard, and in one of the letters that she wrote to him, she said, "It is late, my beloved, and I have carefully stolen from my bed, that I might write to you undisturbed even by the breathings of others. It is after midnight, and the sweet moon is the only witness to my devotion. For 4 days I have done naught but weep. How has our separation affected you? I am very gloomy. Without you, all is darkness, and every place seems like a grave. You ask me if I mix in company? No. I join no merry scenes. Lish, I have not kissed since we parted. On the wings of angels I sent you 10,000 kisses."
Maggie's in love.
Maggie's in love.
She is deeply, deeply in love. That is beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful, and I will accept nothing less moving forward, you know?
Yes.
When they finally reunited, they got secretly married. They had a Quaker ceremony, which didn't require a minister. And they announced the marriage to her family, but not to his family, because they were scared of their reaction, because they were like intense and powerful and weird.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Kane had a lot of health issues.
No.
He, as a kid, had rheumatic fever and he was never really strong. He was really brave and really adventurous. Like, he was an explorer in the Arctic, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought that he was that way despite his illness, you know? And so he was really cool. His health was also damaged even more by all the crazy stuff he was up to, like Arctic expeditions and stuff. They didn't have the stuff we have now, so it was intense, you know?
Yeah, on the body.
Yeah. And 2 years after they got married, secretly, he got another bout of rheumatic fever.
No.
And Kane decided to sail to Cuba, where his doctor hoped that maybe the climate would help him recover. But the treatment failed.
No.
And on a boat in Cuba at the age of 37, Kane had a stroke, a heart stroke, and died.
No.
Maggie was left a widow.
No. It's weird as hell that he is way older than her, but
Yeah.
she was so in love with him.
Yeah, she was happy. She loved him. You know. She never remarried.
Okay.
She was heartbroken. She was heartbroken. And she sank into a deep depression. She would sit alone in the dark and drink herself to unconsciousness. Yeah, she took it really hard. She never recovered from that. She wore mourning clothes for him for the rest of her life, literally.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And Kane's family never approved of her. They didn't even let her come to the funeral. I know.
Wow, that's
know.
so evil.
Your eyes should have looked so beautiful to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. They refused to recognize her as his betrothed because they didn't even know that they got
were
married.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so therefore she wasn't allowed to have any of the share of his estate.
Wow.
And so she retaliated by publishing a collection of his love letters under the title The Love Life of Dr. Kane. Good for her, right?
Yeah. She's like, you know what?
You know, we were in love.
Okay.
No.
I sent him 1,000 kisses on the wings of angels, but you never did that.
Despicable. And she actually converted to Catholicism, which was his religion. And she tried to pray the way that he used to pray. And she would read and reread his letters. And one of them said, "Remember then, as a sort of dream, that Dr. Kane of the Arctic seas loved Maggie Fox of the spirit rappings." Yeah.
I feel so unfair.
I know.
She was happy. She was finally happy.
I know, dude. Leah was not empathetic at all.
Okay, Leah has got to go.
Leah's got to go.
She has got to go.
Okay. She was like, "You gotta do another seance." And Maggie said to Leah, "You are driving me into hell. Now that you're rich, why don't you go and save your soul?"
Is that what she said verbatim?
Yeah, verbatim.
Oh my gosh.
I'm pretty sure. According to the website.
I love that.
I know. At this point, Maggie was super Catholic, and she completely adopted Kane's way of thinking. She hated spiritualism. And Leah was trying to convince Maggie that not only did they have to keep up with the seances, but that they should start a whole new religion.
What?
And yeah. And so they didn't start the new religion, but Maggie kept doing the seances for years after that until she finally had enough. And this is them as adults. This is Maggie, this is Kate, and Leah. Doesn't she look like
Kathy Bates? Yeah, Leah looks like a
Yeah. Doesn't she? She's like... So on October of 1888, Maggie was now in like her mid-50s, and she still wore mourning clothes for Kane, and she was planning on announcing something that nobody saw coming. Nobody. And she had been sleepless for days. She was manic, playing the piano, just acting all crazy, drinking, telling her friends like, "Oh, I'm so excited for this."
What?
And so, yeah, they were like, what is she gonna do? And finally, the night came on October 21st, where Maggie stepped out onto the large stage of the Opera House on East 14th Street to face 4,000 people. And the audience was like, what is happening? What does the legendary Maggie Fox have to say?
Oh my gosh.
And people were shouting words of support. A lot of people were still non-believers, and so some people were like taunting her.
Okay.
But she had been doing this since she was 15. She was used to being famous for the past 40 years, so she didn't pay attention to either group. She was just like,
and also, you know what? Let them. At this point,
Let
they're
'em.
fans.
At this point, they're fans.
You know what I mean? It's like
Exactly.
you're showing up to every event, you're paying every dollar so that you can disprove me.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you want to kiss me.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It's like the people that watch your Instagram story but never like or react. You're a fan.
You're a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Blocked.
So yeah, she was just like not giving them a reaction. She was looking around the room, studying her audience. She put her glasses on, and then she began the speech that changed the Fox sisters' lives forever.
Oh my gosh.
The speech was actually published the same day in the New York World. And this is what she said. My sister Katie and I were very young when this horrible deception began. We were very mischievous children and sought merrily to terrify our dear mother, who was a very good woman and very easily frightened.
No. No.
It took a minute for the crowd to realize what was happening.
No.
Maggie Fox, the star of the most famous medium family in the whole world, was saying that her career, and therefore the religion of spiritualism, which by now was like 8 million strong, was built on a childhood prank.
Oh my gosh.
She and Kate had made up the ghost Charles Rosna. As a joke, the girls had noticed how scared their mom was getting when they would do the rappings, and so they egged each other on to do it louder and louder. And after a few days of making those knocking sounds in the cottage in Hydesville, the sisters started adding props. So they would tie ropes around objects and furniture so that they could make things fall, making loud noises in the middle of the night. They would take apples and tie strings around them so that they would throw the apples from their beds and yank them back, which is like very innovative for children. And they would like yank them back under the covers, make it sound like somebody was like running. And then when their mother would run into the room, they would look all scared and baby, like really playing it up.
That is borderline evil. That is borderline evil.
Yeah.
Oh
and as time went on, they continued with their little tricks. The girls also realized that they had a special skill. They could crack their toe knuckles and ankles loudly, and they practiced this throughout the day.
Oh.
And they would like practice against their bed frame at night. So the wood would produce like a vibration, making it sound like somebody was knocking, like from inside the walls.
What?
And Maggie continued with her speech saying, like most perplexing things when made clear, it is astonishing how easily it is done. The wrappings are simply the result of a perfect control of the muscles of the leg below the knee, which govern the tendons of the foot and allow actions of the toe and ankle bones that is not known. Such perfect control is only possible when a child is taken at an early age and carefully and continually taught to practice the muscles, which grow stiff in later years. A child at 12 is almost too old. With control of the muscles of the foot, the toes may be brought down to the floor without any movement that is perceptible to the eye. The whole foot, in fact, can be made to give wrappings by the use of the muscles below the knee. And she also talked about all the attention they received as children, saying, there were so many people coming to the house that we were not able to make use of the apple trick except when we were in bed and the room was dark. Even then we could hardly do it. The only way was to rap on the bedstead. And she also said that a great many people, when they heard the rapping, imagined at once that the spirits are touching them. It is a very common delusion.
Wow.
I know.
Oh
Some very wealthy people came to see me years ago when I lived in 42nd Street and I did some wrappings for them. I made the spirit rap on the chair and one of the ladies cried out, I feel the spirit tapping me on my shoulder. Of course that was pure imagination.
Margaret!
I know.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? In a Chicago Tribune article called Mrs. Fox Kane's Big Toe, a reporter describing the event said, in that article, it said, one moment it was ludicrous, the next moment it was weird. According to the article, the spiritualists in the audience almost frothed at the mouth with rage and muttered furious threats against their foes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I could see why that would. It's like, why couldn't you just write a letter? Write a letter to the mayor or something.
I know.
And then move away.
Personally, I love it. It's so dramatic. I love it.
Yeah, it is. It really is. She's got to be a Leo, right? When was she born?
I don't know. Kate was actually there. She was fully supporting her big sister. She was in one of the boxes applauding. And Maggie even offered a demonstration for them. So she took off her shoes and tights and showed them like how she would make the wrappings.
Wow.
Yeah. And in that moment, Maggie was happy because she was like, Leo's gonna be so pissed. And she knew that Kane would approve of this.
Yeah, of her just coming clean.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unfortunately, Maggie and Kate had no long-term plans after the confession. They had spent their whole lives playing medium, so they never cultivated literally any other skills.
Yeah.
Maggie, she was paid $1,500 for that speech, and the confession was published in the New York World, and together she and Kate published a pamphlet called The Death Blow to Spiritualism. Leah also published her version of the story, which, like, who cares? That money only lasted so long, though, because the girls were, like, on a long-term bender. They drank a lot. And so the money like went by really fast. And so they didn't have money, and that sucked. About a year later, Maggie tried to take back her confession, and she was like, I needed money at the time and people took advantage of me. I was lying.
Maggie.
I'm like, Maggie,
you already confessed.
I know.
It's like,
I know.
You showed people how you faked it.
I know. Exactly. Some people believed her, like the spiritualists were like, "Oh, you know, I understand that," and some
Oh my
people were like, "You literally showed us how you lied."
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. And so even the people that believed her didn't really want her around because they were like, "Oh, I don't know, girl." And even the spiritualists of the Manhattan Liberal Club didn't want anything to do with her. So nobody claimed her.
Okay.
Yeah. And all three sisters died within just a few years of Maggie's confession.
Oh wow.
Leah died in 1890, Kate in 1892, and Maggie in 1893.
Wow, that's wild that they like, because Leah was so much older than them. That's wild that they all kind of died in the same time.
I know.
Wow.
The Fox family's home foundation today is maintained as a spiritualist holy site, and the Newark Arcadia Historical Society has a collection of material related to the Fox sisters, which I think is so cool. I want to go there so bad.
Oh
and,
my gosh,
like,
I'd
see
love
everything.
to go there.
Yeah. And Maggie and Kate were buried together in Brooklyn, New York, which I thought was really sweet.
Oh.
Laying next to each other just like they did when they were little girls who played a childish prank that ended up starting a religious movement. And that is the story of the Fox sisters.
That was so good. I always cry at the end of your stories, I swear. Amazing.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. We'll be right back. We're gonna drop my back. We're back.
Hi. We're back.
Thank you for watching this month's video. I really appreciate your support. We both do.
You did an amazing job.
Thank you.
I absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
They're literally us.
They're literally us. I was like, I want us to be buried together.
Mm-hmm.
But we are going to pull
As
out
we
the
should.
Annalise, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Or like the Notebook, where it's like one of them's dying, another one dies.
We also haven't lied about our whole lives, but
Part of it.
we're gonna die humble and honest.
Humble and
like
honest
Thelma
men.
and Louise. Hands in hand.
Hands in hands. Well, thank you for being here. I hope that you have a great week. You drink your water, you say your affirmations, you like, share, and subscribe. And hang on while we get famous.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. Bye.